I'm Andrew McHale. I work for Vocera, and we make a wireless voice client you'll predominantly find in healthcare. So my job is just checking how wireless networks that you guys deploy work with my voice client. So all these 10 tips are stuff that I've learned that people have done wrong, and we basically found out how to fix it, and this is it. 20 minutes is still not a lot of time to cover this, but thankfully, me and the two ninjas, I'm really just their warm-up act, quite frankly, but me and the ninjas had a chat a couple of months ago, and if you go to the Wi-Fi Ninjas podcast, episode 11, we get a whole 45 minutes to talk about this, so you can hear it in even more detail there. Okay, so tip number one, and this is a given, right? And Keith said it's the easiest thing to do, coverage. You want at least one access point with a minimum of minus 67 dBm everywhere. That's easy, and probably people are over-designing that right now. And really, the tip has moved on to be ideally 2 access points greater than minus 67 dBm everywhere. And that gives you a nice overlap. That means you've always got a very strong AP that you're leaving and a very strong AP that voice client can go to. So you've got a very nice roam. But what does that actually mean? So if we have 3 APs overlapping, it means that anywhere on the cell edge, I should be picking up 2 APs at minus 67. And that kind of gives you that 50% overlap that Cisco have said voice should have. You can't measure 50% overlap. There's no tool that's really going to do that for you. But if you maintain this standard, then you'll get you more or less 50% overlap. Obviously, that's been the perfect isotropic antenna on all those APs with nothing in the way. So, easy coverage. Second tip, channel plan. I talked about this just at lunch because I'm always battling back and forth with people like Keith and Peter, and we have good banter on it. But we used to deploy networks with 3 to 4 channels, right? You know, 1, 6, and 11, or 4 if you want to push your luck in this country, in 2.4 gigahertz. And it was a really crowded and messy band, and it worked. I've got customers using 2.4 gigahertz with brilliant voice. It works with just 3 to 4 channels. So now we get this 5 gigahertz band, which is so much cleaner. We don't have all the extra trash in there of the microwaves and the baby monitors and the video cameras and Bluetooth and all this stuff. So we've got this great clean band, but people want to suddenly go, oh, I've got 21 channels, I must use all of them. That's not really good for a voice device, because a lot of voice devices will scan all the configured channels. And what do I do when I'm not, or what am I not doing when I'm scanning? I'm not sending data. And you've only got a 150 millisecond delay of data before people are going to notice in the audio conversation. So you can't really spend 200 milliseconds off scanning a bunch of channels because people are going to notice in the conversation. So the less channels you have, the quicker a voice client can scan those channels, decide where it wants to go, and then eventually trigger that roam. On top of that, we only have 4 non-DFS channels in Europe and UK. So America has 8, so they can use 8, and that. When you do a DFS channel, as you see in a moment, you spend a lot less time scanning. So actually, if the whole thing was non-DFS channels, we could probably get away with having 20 channels. That'd be fine. But because we've got only 4 non-DFS and the rest are really slow scanning channels for us, we can't really afford to use a huge channel plan. Something I've got to say at the start actually is, some of these recommendations will go against what you need to do to make other clients work. If you're doing a very high density environment, my recommendations are going to make your job probably impossible. You'll have to pick one or the other. So what you do need to do, as everyone keeps saying, is choose your least capable, most important device. I don't like to think of voice devices as least capable. They're not incapable. They just have very select requirements of the end user. So, but if voice is important to your organization, if you're providing that, you're getting rid of your desk phones and everyone's using Jabber or Skype or whatever for your conferences, then you need to take these designs seriously to have a good experience. So back to the channel plan, what I recommend to my customers, one of them in this room actually modified this recommendation for me, is if you do it indoor only, 36 to 64 is nice and easy. The first 4 channels, in case anyone doesn't know, are our non-DFS channels, 36 to 48. And then just for sequential, just easy management, we go up to the next lot. But if you need to support outdoors, then you need some channels that are allowed outdoors. So then we say, okay, we'll do 36 to 48, because they're your non-DFS, they're the golden channels. Then do 100 to 112 for your outdoor APs. Lots of photos being taken. This has been recorded, and this will be available for you to watch anywhere. And it's not the only time I've done it. So Use 11K. The more a device knows about the channels around it, the less it has to scan. So if you use 11K, then the clients that support it will send out a neighbor request. The AP will respond saying, I can see these 3 BSSIDs. You then have 3 channels to scan, not 21 channels to scan or 8 channels to scan. So use 11K definitely with your channel plan, and that'll make things faster. Okay, on to number 3, which is DFS. I need to put this out of the way of the screen. It's too obvious going to reach for it. I wrote a blog, I don't know, some of you may have read it, why I dislike DFS channels, and you might too. So if you want to know more about DFS and how it affects voice, go read that blog because it's got a lot in there. In summary, DFS channels add a lot of scanning time to a client. So a client goes, you know, it's trying to keep transmitted data going. It's wants to keep data below 150 millisecond latency, but it has to stop doing that to go sense another channel to see if it can go there. That's going to take anywhere from, if you're lucky, 10 milliseconds up to hundreds of milliseconds. So we want to do that as quick as possible so I can do a bit of scanning, come back to my channel, and I've only been away for 20, 30 milliseconds, and so the client's not really noticed the data stream ever stopped. But DFS channels add a lot of scanning time because there's other incumbents on there, weather radar, aviation radar, nautical radar. We have to go on and make sure there's none of that on there first. But the clients can't do that. The clients don't have the capability to scan for radar in them. So what the client actually does is it goes on and it tries to hear a device it trusts. And clients don't trust other clients, they trust the infrastructure. So the client has to go on and wait to hear a beacon or a probe response before it can say, oh, there is genuine 802.11 traffic on this channel, now I can scan. So how does that affect it? So this is to scale times that the Vocera badges at the clients that we make take. So if I'm on a non-DFS channel, be that 2.4 gigahertz or 5, I go and I probe and dwell on a non-DFS channel for 15 milliseconds. So I immediately go on channel, and as soon as my CCA tells me that the airways are clear, I send out a probe, and I wait 15 milliseconds to hear anybody who wants to respond saying, yeah, well, you're good, we support you. Then I go back on channel, and I fill my jitter buffer up to try and hide the fact that I'm doing this process. So I've got one of these blocks between every single channel scan. iPhones work slightly differently. iPhones will go off channel for 100 milliseconds and hit 3 channels at a time and then come back. That's more easy to see because you're going off for 100 milliseconds at a time. We try and do it as small as possible. So off channel for 15, back on channel for 50. So I'm taking 65 milliseconds per channel just to scan one channel for places to go. Once you put DFS on, this is how long I have to wait and listen. This is a beacon interval, so it's 104 milliseconds. You don't have to wait that long, but most clients wait 100 milliseconds because they're trying to guarantee they're going to hear a beacon. But so now I'm listening for this length of time. If the SSID is not hidden, so I hear it in the beacon, then I'm like, okay, I heard a beacon for the SSID I want, so I then go back on channel and I TXRX and I continue that conversation, fill those jitter buffers and try to hide what I'm doing from the user. If you're one of these people who think security is hiding your SSID, then it actually makes the situation worse because I have to listen and go, right, there's genuine traffic there I can transmit, but I didn't hear my ISSID, so then I take this 15-second probe, dwell, and listen. And then I go back on channel for TXRX. So you can just see to scale how much DFS channels hurt our scanning. If you're doing data, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to know that their email came in 2.5 seconds later than it could have done. But if you're doing voice and you have half a second pause in conversation, suddenly your Wi-Fi is broken or your Wi-Fi is rubbish. So for voice, it really, really hurts. So avoid DFS channels if you can. 11K helps, but 11K only helps by shortening the amount of channels we have to scan. If I need to go and scan a DFS channel, I still have to do this laborious long scan. 11K doesn't help with that. All 11K does is it stops me having to scan 21 channels and gives me just 3 to scan. And as I say, advertise SDI and beacons if you're using DFS channels for sure. Okay, tip number 4, 20 megahertz channels. So we're only using 8 channels, right? We've all just agreed that year. I've told you to do that, and you guys are going to leave here and do that. I can trust you guys. We're a team. Good stuff. So you're only using 8 channels, so we really can't afford to bond them, because the moment you bond them, you take that 8 down to 4, and now we're getting lots of overlap in BSSSs. Voice doesn't need 20 megahertz. People think voice is really, really demanding. Well, actually, we're sending a very, very small amount of data very, very often. So we could use 1 megahertz to get our data out. That's as wide as we need. We don't need 20. We definitely don't need 40. So again, if voice is your priority over day-to-day business of emails and things like that, then don't go using 40 megahertz channels. Keep it to 20 so that you've got the most amount of channel reuse you can. And also 25 SNR, which is basically the equivalent of having minus 65 dB signal with minus 90 noise. 25 SNR, which is another figure banded around as what you want to achieve. That can be hard to achieve. But when you bond your channels, so when I go, right, I'm going to stop using 20 megahertz, I'm going to start using 40, you've basically doubled the width of noise coming into that antenna. So you've actually taken a 3 dB noise hit. So your noise floor is increased by 3 dB because you've gone to 40 megahertz. If you then go to 80 megahertz channels, you're taking on an additional 6 dB of noise you don't need. And that can be environmental noise. The planet makes noise in our frequency. It's not all just other clients that we're talking about here. We're talking about genuine RF noise that we can't tolerate or work around. So you really can't afford to bond channels when you're doing voice with an 8-channel plan. So tip number 4, power levels. When I joined Vocera in 2011 and started looking at voice kind of full time, I was going around to everybody on 2.4 gigahertz saying, please turn down your APs. You've got APs at 17 dB, 20 when I worked in America, full power, and we just got too much CCI. I'm seeing a spectrum duty cycle of like 40, 45%. That's not going to support voice. Now in 2019, I'm doing the reverse. I'm going around to people saying, please turn your APs up. They're on the minimum power. They're on power level 7 if we're talking Cisco. They're right down to like 1 dB. And what that means is you've got lovely small cells, which is great for your channel reuse and keeping utilization low. But what it means is a voice device walking down the corridor is roaming every 5 meters. And if it has to roam every 5 meters, it's emptying its jitter buffer because it's off-channel scanning, and therefore you start to introduce choppy audio. So try and keep your power levels up. Too often I go to customers' sites and I just see like minus 25 as the minimum and 30 dBm. RRM is a great tool and I'm an advocate for it, but we need to put a leash on it. We need to give it some boundaries to work in. So we recommend 11 to 14 dBm for voice. That's about where your client in the person's pocket is going to be able to transmit at, and that's going to give you a good amount of power. Again, just remind you may not like all these things, you may not agree with all these things, but if voice is your primary use case, and if you get voice right, most other things will work pretty well, then this is the stuff that makes you successful. So access points in corridors are bad, right? Keith just said it, in his demonstration. If you made a mistake like putting an access point in a corridor, well, not always bad. You should definitely do your coverage plan without APs in the corridor. Get that done first. But then once you've put your plan in, so you've got your coverage, now you need to think about your transition points. So this client here is coming out of this room where it's attached to A. It's turning this corner, coming down to 2. And when it gets down to 2, it's now got this huge blockage between A. So A just disappears like a light switch on it. It's suddenly got no signal. So it's floundering around trying to get something, and it's basically going to probably go to C. Maybe E if it can see it through this corner, but probably C. Then I turn this corner and I get down here, C's suddenly coming on the diagonal through here. It's no good. So where you've got transition points, you can use APs in the corridor. Again, don't use them to predict your coverage because they'll screw up your coverage plan. But once your coverage is good and settled and you're happy with your heat map, then start to introduce transition points, because if you're using 11K, when client 1 joins A for the very first time, it's because, hey, I've joined you, that's great, we're going to have a relationship. But I might want to cheat on you, so who's around you that's good looking? And he'll say, well, I can see B, and I can see F, and I can see C. So this guy goes, okay, right, now I'm leaving, gets down here, and now it's time to cheat. He's no longer getting what he needs from A. So he's like, right, okay, well, I can scan for B, C, and A. He's never going to see B. He scans for C, scans for F, sees them, F's really strong, he attaches to it. When he attaches to F, he goes, hey, I really like you, you're the new one in my life, but I might want to cheat on you one day, where am I going to go? And so F goes, well, I know about this guy called G, and I know about this guy called C, and I know about this guy called B. So he's like, okay, fine, whatever. Comes down, turns the corner, gets to point 3, and now F's no longer good enough for him. So he's like, okay, well, I know about C, B, and G. Finds G, nice strong signal. Asks G about where can I go. He says E, C. And as you move around, you've basically covered that transition point. The device always has somewhere to go that it already knows about when it's doing these transitions. Otherwise, you're just going to get 3 points here without these ones in the corridor where your signal's going to drop like a stone and your user's going to say, Wi-Fi's really bad in that area. It's not. You've got great coverage. The problem is you've not worked out your transition paths. Okay. So, PSK, OKC, and 11R. I did a presentation at WLPC last month on KV&R on voice. So go and look at it on YouTube or on the WLAN Pros website, and it'll give you a lot more information about the amendments there. Very, very useful for voice. But what do we want? Fast roams. When do we want them? Every single time. Appreciated key has always been our favourite go-to method of authentication because it's quick and consistent. With appreciated key on WPA2 AES, you're going to take about 80 to 100 milliseconds to roam from the association point all the way through to the end in the four-way handshake. You're going to take about 80 to 100 milliseconds. That's good. That's within our jitter buffer. We're happy with that. However, can we do any better? Well, if we don't have the handshake, which takes most of the time, we absolutely can. And CCKM, OKC, and 11R, if you're doing .1x, will actually remove the handshake. It won't if you're doing PSK, it won't. So 11R with PSK, fast transition with PSK, doesn't remove the handshake. You still have to do it. So that's no real benefit. But if you're using .1x and you use any of these features, CCKM, Cisco proprietary, OKC's WFAs, and 11R obviously is now the new official standard from IEEE. If you use any of those, you can make your roams really, really quick. But do not make your client do radius every time. If you're not going to use these guys and you are going to perform authentication every time, you need to go to PSK because radius every time is just too slow for voice. That's a 400 millisecond transaction. That's not going to be good with a 150 millisecond latency requirement. I did this in 10 minutes last month. Can you imagine how quick I had to go then? Blimey. Do not do subnet roaming. Very similar to radius. A quick DHCP exchange is 400 milliseconds. That's lightning fast in the Ethernet world. We're quite happy with that. But when we're talking about voice, that's horrible. We need below 150, so you're more than double what we're asking for in terms of roaming. So don't have roaming between, if I'm moving from one AP to another, do not make me do a DHCP exchange when I'm moving. Because then I've got 400 milliseconds of DHCP, plus 100, 200 milliseconds of actually scanning and performing the authentication from the access point. Just, you know, crying kittens, sad faces, all sorts of horrible memes basically go with that when it comes to roaming. So support a user. They get do DHCP association the very first time the client powers up or joins your network, and then set the release for the lease renewal for the entire business. Yes, that might mean if you're in a guest area, you have to have bigger IP scopes. But if your internal staff, where they're going to be in the building for that solid 8 hours, they're not guests per se, then 8 hours in business, 12 hours in hospitality and healthcare. Again, I didn't say you'd like all of these things. I'm just telling you what people have done wrong, and I've had to go and tell them to fix to make their voice work properly. Okay, this next slide is really, really simple. How can it be simple? Because end-to-end QoS is complex. Well, I'm not going to explain how to get QoS working in a session. All I'm going to tell you is that you need to suck it up. Voice needs QoS. Right? And it needs end-to-end QoS. Most voice clients, apart from Skype it seems, which really blows my mind why they do this, but most voice clients will tag their stuff upstream. That's great, but what about when it's coming downstream? If you've got peer-to-peer voice clients, so you've got Cisco phones, Mitel phones, Ascom phones, those Sierra badges, or even FaceTime is peer-to-peer, believe it or not. They're not using Internet Gateway, and those two people are in the same building, then we need QoS all the way up and all the way down. Maybe Skype don't do it because they know their data goes to the Internet Gateway, and once it hits the Internet, all QoS tags are lost, so there's no good there. So maybe that's why they don't bother doing it. But yeah, you need to get it working. You know, highly paid professionals in the room, I hope. You need to go and find out why QoS is not working. You need to take packet captures and make sure that the upstream traffic has QoS, and more importantly, the downstream packets has QoS. Okay, I kind of goes over that. Right, last one with 40 seconds left. If you're designing for elevators, do not do this. First of all, if you're designing for elevators, you have to have them in the lifts. If you don't have APs in your lifts, you're going to lose voice when you go in. You get into a metal box and you're transiting through reinforced concrete to go somewhere. Your voice is going to stop working. So if you want to support lifts, you have to find a way to get the APs in the lift. We hear all sorts of legislation, this can't be done. Well, I've got customers in this country doing APs in lifts. So they're either breaking the law or they found a way to do it. So you can do it. But what you don't want to do is put your AP in the lift lobby, because what happens is the client comes in here, associates and goes, this is great. I'm not even going to bother scanning for anybody else. I'm going to rest on my laurels because I've got great signal and this is a great experience. Then they get in the lift, those doors shut, they go through the reinforced concrete, and suddenly, hey, where did my friend go? There's nothing going on here. So what you want to do is actually provide cell edge coverage. So even though it's not going to be the best voice experience in the lift lobby, we want the devices to start hunting. We want them to say, I'm right down at kind of minus 67, maybe minus 70 dBm here. I need to start looking for somewhere to go. Then the lift doors open and there's this shining angel in the lift that goes, I can talk to you. And it goes, well, there's no one else here, so you and me, let's go. Jump in the lift and you're connected. When you transition out the lift, it's not going to be as smooth because that lift AP is going away. The door's going to close, it's going to go away. You are going to get cliff edge as you exit a lift. But here, because we've designed it this way, you're turning left, you're turning right, there's strong candidates. The moment you get out of the lobby, there's strong candidates. So exiting lifts is more dangerous or more problematic, but this is the best way to do it. People think, oh, I'm supporting lifts, I must put one in the lobby, and they actually make things worse for themselves. So with that, that was 10 tips in 20 minutes, and if you want to talk any more about them, blog, Twitter, email, or just come find me.